Hello and welcome to another video game review. My name is Phil, I'm from Tooth Soup, and this time I'll be exploring the minimalist horror trappings of Home, an indie game put together by Benjamin Rivers, which has been available for a while now, but which has only recently been released to a larger audience through the Steam platform. For this review, I'm going to talk more about Home's design than its second-by-second gameplay, in part because the mechanics are so straightforward that even non-gamers could just jump in and start exploring, but also because there are some clever choices that have been made, which I really wanted to explore. A quick disclaimer before I get into the nitty gritty: Home is a game that is made to be replayed multiple times with multiple endings. My review of the game is based on 2 playthroughs, each time trying to do different things to see what effect they had on the story arc. So if anyone watching can tell that one or more of my comments or criticisms are as a result of me not having discovered an area of the game, please tell me and I'll be sure to add an edit in the description. Now, Home is a game that would probably fall more under interactive fiction than an all-out horror game. And the fiction the player is interacting with in this case is the story of a man who wakes up in a darkened house he doesn't know, next to a dead body he doesn't recognize, with only limited vision to guide him, courtesy of a flashlight. And from then on, it's up to you to guide the character back to his home. On a practical level, this is done by walking around with the normal left and right keys and interacting with objects via the simple press of a spacebar, which brings up a silent film-esque text box that takes up the entire screen for easy reading. I really quite liked the way this was done, and while some might trot out the old "it breaks immersion" argument, I think the time it takes to read maybe a few sentences worth of world, character, or item lore is so short as to hardly be considered a break. I would, however, have liked to have seen the switch to text used to deliver maybe a couple of scares throughout the game. For example, some kind of ambiguous noise stopping the letters being printed across the text box and causing the protagonist to wonder what had made the sound. Or perhaps an animal or object appearing after the text had been read where the player doesn't expect it. There are other instances of these kinds of small, shock-type thrills in the game, so it wouldn't have been breaking with its character too much to include something a little bit extra. The main gameplay mechanic is that throughout the game, various yes or no choices will be presented to you. Do you pick up a bloodied knife in a strange dungeon? Do you free a mouse from a mousetrap? Do you watch a VCR tape you found in the garbage? The way the game works is that with each choice you make, you are building up the story of the man you are playing as. And thankfully, unlike other games that use this mechanic, it never feels like there's a right or a wrong decision to second guess. While I'll be the first to say that this gameplay mechanic is not particularly novel in and of itself, the novelty lies in how well implemented the resulting storyline deviations are from the choices. In a way, it's like a personality test, and the end of the game gives you the results from that in a deliberately open-ended fashion. So open, in fact, that it even encourages you in the credits to visit a community website and post your interpretation of the events of the game. And even from my 2 playthroughs, those interpretations are wildly different. Unfortunately, I can't really discuss any of the decisions made throughout the game without spoiling, but what I can say is that if you find yourself getting annoyed by not knowing much as you go along, just roll with it. And if you think you know what's going to happen, think again. Keep in mind that you are the one that makes the decisions regarding the story. At the conclusion of the game, the final interpretive summary of the events depends entirely on your decisions throughout. And in one of the more bold pieces of the game's design, it turns out that some of those decisions aren't wrapped in metaphors. It's like a murder mystery, but one where you are able to point the finger and make reality rap to your accusation. Ensuring that the game works with the myriad choices that the players can make must have been a very complicated task, and Rivers should be commended for the relative smoothness with which it is achieved. Before I finish, I just wanted to make mention of one little game design choice which I think is really clever and might be glossed over by others, and it has to do with the game controls. Along with walking around and interacting with objects, there is also the ability to look up with the flashlight. This doesn't do very much other than just illuminating a few pixels more above the player's head. And I know that doesn't sound particularly mind-blowing, but the interesting thing is that most of the time in the game there is no specific need to do this. In both my playthroughs, I think there were maybe 2 or 3 times when looking up gave me an option to climb a ladder or look at an object. But the thing is, the levels are deliberately made so that you cannot see the roof without looking up and using this mechanic. As a result of that, and the player actually ever being given the ability to look up, I was constantly worried that something was going to come down at me from the ceiling. So I'd be nervously checking the roof every 10 steps or so to make sure I wasn't going to be shock frightened by some triggered event. It's this kind of meta-gamer trickery that makes indie games such as these really, really interesting. Anyway, I can't really talk very much further without straying into spoiler territory, and I really don't want to be that guy, so I'll wrap it there. At the moment, Home is on sale through the Steam platform for a measly $2.54 US until the 8th of September, after which it'll still only be $2.99 US. Grab it if you are interested in transmedia or interactive storytelling and want a good example to cite on your latest essay, or if you're keen to experience a fascinating psychological horror story. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.